civilization has long been enamored with the sea. It seems that as long as humans have lived near the ocean, they've retained an almost reverential respect for the uncontrollable element, and for good reason. As much as coastal-dwelling humans rely on the sea for food and livelihood, the sea constantly reminds us we're at the mercy of its ebbs and flows. Increasing technology has brought us no closer to conquering the stormy and mysterious depths, and people frequently disappear in the waves, never to be seen again. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 cases where humans have found themselves lost at sea and the journey they've embarked on. Sailor finds uncle that went missing years ago. Uwayne Baranabui and Tamea Tonaki are residents of the small Pacific island Kiribati and are no strangers to the vengeance of the waves. As members of a small fishing community, it's not uncommon for fishermen to leave the fish for a day and never come back, presumed to be lost at sea. Their uncle, Biro, disappeared in this manner over 60 years ago when he failed to return from his daily fishing trip and was never heard from again. Although Biro went missing in the late 1950s, decades later, his 2 nephews inadvertently followed their uncle's footsteps. On the return trip from a nighttime fishing expedition, the 2 men found themselves adrift in the wide expanse of the sea when their navigation equipment ran out of power. What should have been a 60-kilometre journey quickly turned into a 600-kilometre one, pushing them completely off course. They drifted for 33 days, surviving on salt water and what little fish they could catch, often going 3 to 4 days with no food. The US Coast Guard mounted a search for the missing islanders, and they frequently heard the sounds of planes in the distance, but were never spotted. The pair were starving and weak, and had almost given up hope of rescue when they drifted upon a remote atoll of Namdrik in the Marshall Islands. Namdrik is a small isolated community with barely 600 inhabitants. The 2 men were ushered by the villagers to the only resident who spoke their language. They quickly discovered that the woman was a descendant of their uncle Biro, who had disappeared all those years ago. He had evidently made the same trip that they had just made. After interviewing the villagers, they discovered that Biro had run aground just like them, but at the time there was no way to contact anyone or return home. So instead, he became a resident and married into the community, starting a family. The Pacific Island region covers millions of square kilometers of ocean, with around 1,779 islands and atolls in the Pacific Basin. So the odds that the uncle and his nephews would drift so far off course and still manage to run aground to the same small island is amazing. After returning to their home island of Kiribati and sharing their amazing story, other residents have now been given hope as the fate of their own family members who were presumed lost. Perhaps they too managed to drift onto an unknown island and, unable to contact home, start a new life and new families for themselves. Fishermen lost at sea for 9 months. 3 fishermen from Mexico made headlines after they returned home from a fishing excursion 285 days after they had departed, having drifted in the ocean for over 3 months. The men, along with another fishing guide and the owner of the boat, left from a fishing village for a shark fishing expedition, but lost their heavy shark tackle and mistakenly ran out of fuel searching the waves for it. Left with no way to steer or propel the 29-foot boat, the ocean's wind quickly pushed them out to sea. They ended up over 8,000 kilometers to the west of their home. With nothing on the boat but the few provisions they'd bought for what was supposed to only be a day-long trip, and no shelter from the beating sun, the 5 men had to rely on survival skills to make it day to day. They fashioned makeshift fishing lines from engine cables taken from their now useless engine, and caught and ate raw fish and seabirds, and collected rainwater for drinking. However, the owner of the boat and the 3rd fisherman passed away due to starvation and had to be thrown overboard. They occasionally saw larger boats in the distance, although sometimes there would be a month or more between sightings. This allowed them some hope of being rescued, even as they grew more and more emaciated. However, none of these boats spotted them until one day a Taiwanese fishing boat rescued the men near the Marshall Islands. It had been 285 days since the crew had seen dry land, which is one of the longest cases of record of survival after being lost at sea. Clocking in at just over 9 months, the 3 men were lucky to have been able to survive that harrowing ordeal. Their survival was largely due to the fact that they were drifting in fairly calm waters that were free of hurricanes, where there was frequent rain and cloud cover. There is no doubt with just a little less luck, these men would have passed away due to deprivation of food, just like their other 2 crew members. Although their story is bittersweet, it's also a testament to the vastness and fickleness of the ocean, that a boat could drift for so many days and not be seen by another soul for a better part of a year. Maurice and Marilyn Bailey. Maurice and Marilyn Bailey were British citizens who were looking to start a new life abroad. They sold all of their belongings to buy a 9.4-metre yacht, the Orlin, and emigrate to New Zealand by sea. However, the journey was not going to be the easy, carefree trip they'd planned. They passed through the Panama Canal without any trouble and were on their way to the Galapagos Islands when their yacht was struck by a whale. It was severely damaged and began to sink. Thinking quickly, they loaded an inflatable life raft with as many supplies as possible. They were forced to watch as their beloved Orlin sank below the waves, stranded in the middle of the ocean with no way to contact land. At first, they kept themselves occupied by reading and playing card games they'd stowed on the raft, but they soon had to devote themselves entirely to survival. When their food stores ran out, they collected rainwater and constructed safety pins into hooks to catch turtles, seabirds, and fish for food. However, they soon became severely malnourished despite their best efforts. They also developed incredibly painful friction-induced sores that festered under the damp conditions in the wet raft. They constantly had to bail out water to stay afloat as the huge ocean waves crashed into their small boat, and after several days of drifting, the walls of the raft began to disintegrate in the salt water and harsh conditions. At this point it required frequent re-inflating. Several storms trapped the small raft, tossing it back and forth at the mercy of the waves. All the while, sharks circled the couple, waiting for them to give up and allow the raft to sink into the waiting sea. Despite their misery and the exhaustion of having to constantly fight for their survival, they were able to find hope in many marine animals that followed them in their aimless journey and helped to alleviate their isolation, so much so that they both became vegetarians after their rescue. Finally, after having drifting 2,400 kilometers, the Baileys were spotted by a South Korean fishing boat that circled back to rescue them. It had now been 4 months since they'd seen another human. By the end of their ordeal, the pair had lost 18 kilograms each, and their legs could barely support themselves. After recuperating and gaining their strength back, Maurice and Marilyn became well known and celebrated for overcoming such a journey. They published an account of their experiences entitled 117 Days Adrift. The following year, they bravely returned to sea in their new yacht, the Orlin II, a testament to the resilience of humankind. There's no doubt the sea is wild and fierce. As much as we need it to survive, we'll always be at the mercy of the tides and will never be able to claim control over these huge expanses. It has proven time and time again that it can lash out at any time, taking and ruining lives where it pleases, even those who have spent their entire lives on the water. Those who have been lost at sea, drifting with the current and with no civilization in sight, will be able to testify to its power. These survivors were the lucky ones, as the ocean frequently doesn't return those lives it claims, and we can each only hope and pray that we never find ourselves in such a situation. So what do you make of these people lost at sea? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community whilst working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.